The late afternoon sun glinted harshly off the edges of the Texas shooting range, turning the sand and gravel into a shimmering, almost blinding expanse. Emily tightened her grip on the bright red rifle, a gift she had received from her grandfather on her 15th birthday. The paint on the stock was chipped slightly, and the barrel bore scratches from years of careful use, but to her, it was more than a weapon. It was a symbol, a tangible reminder of the man who had taught her everything she knew about patience, precision, and respect for the craft. Her heart thrummed in her chest, a slow, steady beat she tried desperately to keep calm. Around her, a cluster of teenagers leaned against their rifles, snickering and whispering, their eyes flicking toward her as if she were some fragile, colorful anomaly on the range. She brought a toy to a real shooting range, one boy muttered under his breath, loud enough for half the group to hear. Emily's cheeks flushed slightly, not with shame, but with a simmering determination. She had long since learned that external voices could not dictate her worth or her abilities. The red rifle, with its polished stock and carefully calibrated scope, might have looked playful to them, but Emily knew its weight, its balance, its voice. Her grandfather had spent hours teaching her to feel the recoil, the subtle vibration through her hands, the exact moment when the bullet left the barrel. Each shot was a conversation between the rifle and her mind, and she had listened to that conversation countless times in the empty fields behind her house. Her grandfather's lessons played over in her memory, crisp as if he were still beside her. Emily, he had said, crouched beside her with his own seasoned rifle resting against the crate. It's never the rifle. It's the mind behind it. Calm, steady, thoughtful. That's what hits the target. You can't rush it. You can't let noise get in your head. Listen to the rifle. Trust yourself. She repeated his words quietly to herself, almost as a mantra. Trust yourself. Ignore the mocking. Focus. The teens around her, boys and girls alike, were laughing now, some openly pointing at her red rifle. Hey, Barbie's bringing out her big gun. Someone jeered, and a ripple of laughter went through the group. Emily forced her jaw to relax, breathing deeply. The laughter was heavy, cloying, meant to throw her off. She allowed it to wash over her like water over rocks, feeling its edges, but not letting it erode her concentration. The target was set at an almost impossible distance, nearly 6,000 meters away. For the untrained eye, it looked like a mere speck of silver shining in the sunlight, a dot that seemed smaller than a coin from where she stood. The other teens glanced at it skeptically. Even Hank, the grizzled range master, had raised a brow when Emily had mentioned she intended to attempt a shot that far. That's ambitious, kid, he had said, his voice gruff but not unkind. Most adults don't even try it. You sure about this? I'm sure, Emily had replied, her tone steady. She had been practicing for this moment for months, long after school and chores, after helping her mother around the house, after everything that made her life feel ordinary. Each day, she had measured distance, calculated wind speed, tracked humidity, even adjusted for slight inclines. She had plotted trajectories, learned about bullet drop, and spent hours on the simulator her grandfather had built in the garage. This shot wasn't luck, it was preparation. But as the laughter of her peers washed over her, she couldn't help but feel a pang of vulnerability. Being mocked was never easy, and being young and small in a space dominated by older, taller, more boisterous teens made her an easy target. Yet, beneath that vulnerability, there was a spark of defiance. She loved this sport too much to let the noise of adolescence discourage her. Every snicker, every pointed finger, only reinforced her resolve. She crouched slightly, resting the rifle against her shoulder, feeling its familiar weight. Her fingers traced the stock, her thumb finding the perfect position along the trigger. She adjusted the scope, slowly, deliberately, lining the crosshairs with the tiny silver target far away. The wind was steady but unpredictable, rustling the grass and causing a faint shimmer in the distance. Emily's eyes narrowed as she measured every fraction of a movement, every subtle deviation. Her grandfather's teachings echoed in her mind. You are part of the shot, Emily. Don't just fire. Understand it. The teens around her were growing restless. Some rolled their eyes. Others whispered among themselves, doubting she would even hit the general area. One boy leaned back against the fence and laughed, tossing a pebble into the sand. She's going to miss by miles, he said, grinning. Emily's lips pressed together. She didn't respond. Her focus was a shield. Nothing beyond the scope existed. The noise, the ridicule, even the sun glaring off her target, all of it faded when she looked through her sights. Hank, meanwhile, watched from a distance, his arms crossed. He had seen countless young shooters come and go, many bursting with bravado and little skill. Emily's quiet, methodical preparation intrigued him. He had been in the military, trained to long-range shooting, seen impossible shots made under impossible conditions. And yet, watching her, he could see an instinct, a patience, that mirrored his own younger self. It was rare and dangerous in its potential. Emily adjusted her stance, planting her feet firmly in the gravel. She shifted her weight slightly, feeling the subtle give of the ground beneath her. The red rifle felt like an extension of herself now, her muscles recalling every movement drilled into them over countless afternoons of practice. She breathed deeply, letting the air fill her lungs, slowing her heartbeat to a calm, steady rhythm. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Each breath was a metronome, synchronizing her mind and body. Around her, the laughter began to fade as some of the other teens noticed the meticulous care she was taking. A few exchanged glances, doubt creeping in. She wasn't nervous. She was calculating. Every adjustment, every pause, every measured movement was deliberate. She wasn't here to impress anyone but herself, and maybe, in the quietest corner of her mind, to honor her grandfather. As she raised the rifle again, bringing the crosshairs to rest on the faraway target, she felt a surge of calm energy. It was the strange mix of anticipation and control that came before something remarkable. The range, once a place of laughter and derision, seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind seemed to soften. Emily's finger hovered over the trigger, a spark of focus igniting in her chest. This was her moment, and she knew it. The mockery, the doubts, the teasing voices, they were all part of the stage. She didn't need applause yet. She only needed the shot. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, imagining the bullet traveling across the valley, hitting its mark precisely, ringing true against the steel target. Her grandfather's voice whispered in her memory again, steady, firm. Trust yourself, Emily. The rifle doesn't lie, and neither do you. She opened her eyes. Her lips curved in a small, confident smile. Let them watch, let them doubt. She knew what she was capable of, and she was ready. The sunlight glared off the barrel of her red rifle as she took a final, careful breath, exhaled slowly, and prepared to make history. Hank squinted at Emily as she adjusted her stance, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the Texas shooting range. He had been in this line of work a long time, decades of guiding young shooters, managing competitions, and keeping an eye on prodigies who seemed to appear once in a generation. He'd seen overconfident kids, eager to prove themselves with flashy rifles and wild shots, and he'd seen talented ones, quiet and precise, who held a mastery beyond their years. Emily, with her bright red rifle and calm demeanor, fit neither category entirely. She seemed something different. "Kid," Hank called, his voice carrying over the soft hum of the wind. "You sure you want to do this?" He gestured toward the target, which gleamed like a pinpoint of silver across the valley. It was farther than most adults had dared attempt, nearly 6,000 meters away. Many had considered it impossible, and even seasoned marksmen approached it with hesitation. Emily didn't flinch. "I'm sure," she said simply, her voice steady and confident. Her fingers traced the smooth edges of the rifle, as if greeting an old friend. To the others, it might have looked like a simple gesture, but to Hank, he could see the ritual of preparation. This wasn't a child fumbling with a toy. This was someone who had spent countless hours studying, practicing, and mastering her craft. The other teens around her had begun to gather in small groups, whispering nervously. Some of the earlier mockery had faded, replaced by curiosity. One or two of the older boys shifted their weight, unconsciously giving her space. She could sense the change in the atmosphere, but she didn't let it affect her. The mockery had never mattered. What mattered was what she could control. Emily crouched slightly, planting her feet firmly in the gravel. She adjusted the scope again, carefully calibrating for wind drift, humidity, and elevation. Every fraction of a degree mattered at this distance. One small error could mean a miss by dozens of meters. She could feel the weight of responsibility in her hands, but it wasn't fear, it was focus. She was about to perform an extraordinary feat, and she knew it. The wind shifted slightly, carrying the faint scent of dust and dry grass. Emily squinted through the scope, noting the subtle ripple in the distant air. She adjusted for wind, her fingers steady as they moved the knobs with deliberate precision. She felt her heartbeat slow, each pulse syncing with her breathing. The mantra she had repeated countless times in her grandfather's garage echoed in her mind. A calm mind shoots truest. Hank watched silently, leaning against the fence, his hands crossed over his chest. He'd seen plenty of confident shooters crumble under pressure, their nerves betraying them. But Emily's calm was different. It wasn't arrogance or naivety. It was preparation. Every adjustment she made was precise, deliberate, and thoughtful. Even from a distance, he could see the intensity in her eyes, the kind that didn't waver under scrutiny. The teens nearby had begun to whisper among themselves. "Do you think she can actually do it?" One girl asked, her voice tinged with awe. Another boy shook his head, incredulous. "She's a kid. There's no way she can hit that thing." Emily didn't hear them, and she didn't need to. Their opinions were irrelevant. What mattered was the science, the calculation, the rhythm of her own body. Emily adjusted her stance again, noting the slight incline beneath her feet. She shifted her weight, feeling the give of the gravel, the subtle balance required for the perfect shot. Every detail mattered. She wasn't just aiming. She was creating a harmony between herself, the rifle, and the environment. Her grandfather's lessons weren't just memories. They were living instructions guiding every motion. She glanced down at her hands. The red rifle was more than just a weapon. It was a partner. The stock fit perfectly against her shoulder. The barrel aligned with the trajectory she had calculated, the scope offering a window into a world almost 6 kilometers away. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a dot on the horizon, but to Emily, it was the culmination of months of careful planning, practice, and study. "Focus, Emily," she whispered, almost as if speaking to herself. "Focus and trust." Her finger hovered over the trigger, trembling slightly, not with fear, but with anticipation. She knew the importance of this moment, the rare alignment of preparation and opportunity. She had imagined this shot countless times, visualizing the bullet's arc, predicting how it would meet the steel target, the sound it would make, the silence that would follow. Hank approached slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel. "You've thought this through," he said, his tone more statement than question. "Most people never consider all the variables, but you're ready." Emily nodded, her eyes still locked on the distant target. Hank could see the respect she held for the rifle, the way she had internalized every lesson. He'd taught many shooters over the years, but very few had this combination of patience, calculation, and nerve. The other teens began to edge closer, drawn by curiosity. The mocking had faded, replaced by a collective sense of suspense. Nobody spoke now. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Emily's calm focus was magnetic, drawing attention without effort. The red rifle, once dismissed as a toy, had become a symbol of quiet determination. She took a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs completely before exhaling slowly. She adjusted the scope one final time, aligning the crosshairs with the tiny glint of the steel target across the valley. Her eyes narrowed, tracing the invisible path the bullet would take. The distance seemed impossible, yet she didn't hesitate. Every calculation, every adjustment, had led to this precise moment. Hank stepped back, silently observing. He knew the importance of letting shooters find their rhythm. Interference could ruin a shot, and Emily clearly had her rhythm. Her grandfather's teachings had prepared her, but her own discipline had brought her here. This was the intersection of preparation and execution, the moment where skill and courage collided. The first whisper of doubt came from the crowd behind her, soft and tentative. Maybe she actually can. Someone murmured. The teens who had mocked her shifted nervously, sensing that they were witnessing something rare. Emily didn't acknowledge them. She had never needed their approval, only their silence to allow her concentration to thrive. She adjusted her stance once more, making a minor correction to account for the slope of the terrain and the high, slight gusts that had begun to ripple through the grass. The rifle felt like an extension of her own body. Every muscle, every nerve, was aligned with the path of the bullet. She exhaled slowly, letting her mind quiet itself completely. Hank's eyes narrowed slightly, watching her with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. He had seen prodigies, but few with this level of methodical precision and patience. Most young shooters relied on raw talent or luck, but Emily relied on knowledge, observation, and control. The target might have been nearly 6 kilometers away, but Emily's mind had already mapped the trajectory, calculated the arc, and measured the impact with unerring certainty. Emily's finger hovered over the trigger. She allowed herself one more deep breath, letting her body align perfectly with the rifle, the scope, the air, and the distant target. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. The rifle doesn't lie. Neither do you. Be patient, be steady, be true. She opened her eyes fully, scanning the horizon one last time. The steel target was still, almost impossibly far away, glinting faintly in the sun. Everything seemed to converge in this moment. The silence, the anticipation, the weight of expectation. Emily's lips curved in a small, confident smile. She was ready. And the world, for the first time in hours, seemed to stop and watch. The afternoon sun had begun its slow descent, painting the Texas range with warm, golden hues. Shadows stretched across the gravel, creating jagged patterns beneath Emily's feet. She crouched slightly, her red rifle snug against her shoulder, her finger hovering just above the trigger. The distant steel target shimmered like a tiny coin against the backdrop of rolling hills, almost impossibly far away. 6,000 meters. It was a distance that would test even the most experienced marksman. For Emily, it was the culmination of months of preparation, each hour of practice sharpening her skills like a whetstone. The air was heavy with expectation. Hank, the veteran rangemaster, had moved to the edge of the observation area, his arms crossed, his eyes narrowing. The other teens clustered behind the safety fence, some whispering, others holding their breath, all of them unable to tear their gaze from the improbable scene unfolding. The laughter of the morning had completely dissipated, replaced by tense curiosity and unspoken skepticism. Emily exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle in her hands. It was steady, almost reassuring. She had learned to trust it, just as she trusted herself. Her grandfather's lessons resonated in her mind. Every shot is a conversation. The rifle speaks. You listen. Timing, patience, and focus will tell you where to place your aim. She repeated these words silently, centering herself for the moment that would define the day. Hank murmured to himself, "This is either brilliance or madness." He had been on ranges around the world, seen impossible shots attempted in controlled environments, and yet here was a 17-year-old girl about to attempt the unthinkable with a brightly painted rifle that most would dismiss as a toy. He had taught many shooters to respect distances, to plan meticulously, to master their nerves. Few had embraced preparation with such quiet intensity. Emily was unusual in a way that commanded attention. She adjusted the scope one last time, calibrating for wind, gravity, and elevation. Every factor mattered. She noticed a faint breeze shifting the tall grass, a subtle ripple of heat from the sun-baked earth. She calculated, adjusted, and rechecked. Her muscles tensed with anticipation, but her mind was calm, a quiet center of focus. She was ready. The teens behind her murmured nervously. "Do you think she can actually?" one whispered, cutting off when the tension in the air became almost palpable. Their mocking had evaporated. Skepticism had taken its place. Even they could feel the weight of the moment, the sense that something extraordinary might be about to happen. Emily didn't notice them. Their whispers and glances were irrelevant. Her attention was fixed entirely on the steel target, glinting faintly 6 kilometers away. She exhaled again, letting the air out slowly, smoothing her heartbeat into a calm rhythm. Her grandfather's voice seemed to echo in her mind. "Trust yourself. The rifle will guide you, but only if you guide it." Emily squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked sharply, the sound echoing across the hills like thunder breaking over a distant ridge. The bullet tore through the air, a silver streak almost invisible against the bright sunlight. For a heartbeat, Emily felt weightless, as if suspended between possibility and reality. She tracked the bullet through the scope as best she could, though at such a distance, the arc was subtle, the flight invisible to the naked eye. The first shot did not hit the target. It passed slightly to the left, a miss that was obvious to her, but invisible to everyone else. The teens behind her muttered quietly, some with smug satisfaction. "Told you," one boy said, shaking his head. "It's a toy. She can't even hit the target." A ripple of laughter, soft, uncertain, moved through the crowd. Emily's jaw tightened. The first shot was always a learning moment, and she treated it as such. She reviewed her calculations in her mind, checking wind speed, humidity, elevation, and even the subtle tilt in her stance. She had expected some adjustment, and she welcomed it. This was not failure. It was data, science, precision. She reminded herself that her grandfather had taught her to respect the process, not the outcome. Hank watched silently, leaning on the fence. Even with the miss, he could see the method in Emily's approach. Most teenagers would have panicked or rushed, seeking validation from the crowd. Emily had paused, observed, calculated, and prepared to act again. There was patience in her every movement, a maturity beyond her years. He nodded slightly to himself, acknowledging the rare skill he was witnessing. Emily reloaded the rifle with careful precision, her movements fluid but deliberate. She adjusted her grip, checked the scope, and realigned the crosshairs. The wind had shifted slightly, and she accounted for the minor change in trajectory. She exhaled slowly, centering herself once more. The crowd's nervous energy seemed to settle as they watched her meticulous process, tension mounting with every measured motion. Her finger hovered over the trigger again. She remembered every single lesson her grandfather had taught her, the way to feel the rifle's recoil, how to synchronize breathing with the pull, how to trust the calculations embedded in her mind. Every detail mattered, Every fraction of a degree could mean the difference between success and failure. She was not intimidated by the distance or by the skeptics around her. She was ready. The second attempt came almost immediately after the first. The rifle barked once more, echoing across the valley. Emily's eyes followed the invisible trajectory, tracking the path she had calculated. Time seemed to slow, stretching the moment into something almost unreal. The crowd leaned forward instinctively, holding its collective breath. Even Hank, a man hardened by decades of experience, felt a thrill of anticipation. This was more than a shot. It was the culmination of focus, preparation, and courage. The bullet arced gracefully through the air, and this time, it struck closer, so close that Emily could detect the faint vibration through her scope, the subtle reaction of the target. The teens behind her gasped softly, some exchanging incredulous looks. "Did you see that?" whispered one girl, her tone barely audible. The air around Emily seemed charged, thick with the energy of possibility. Emily didn't celebrate. She only recalibrated, noting the small margin of error, the influence of the wind, and the adjustments needed for the final shot. Her mind was calm, yet electric with concentration. This was the moment she had trained for every missed calculation. Every practice session, every solitary afternoon spent perfecting her aim, had led to this. Hank's face betrayed a rare smile. "She's not just shooting," he muttered, almost to himself. "She's thinking, planning, calculating." Most shooters rely on reflex or intuition at this distance. Emily relied on knowledge and preparation, merging it seamlessly with instinct. The result was a combination that few had witnessed in their lifetimes. The teens who had mocked her earlier were now silent, leaning against fences and equipment, eyes wide in disbelief. The red rifle, once dismissed as a toy, had become a symbol of quiet mastery. Emily's methodical approach, her calm focus, and her unwavering confidence had transformed ridicule into tension, skepticism into awe. Emily adjusted the scope one final time, making micro-adjustments that reflected her deep understanding of physics and environment. The wind had shifted subtly again, and she accounted for it. She exhaled slowly, synchronizing her breathing with the rhythm of her heartbeat. Every fraction of a second mattered, every adjustment counted. She pressed the trigger a third time, her calm resolve guiding the bullet across the valley. The shot rang out sharply, echoing through the hills like a clarion call. Time seemed to suspend itself as the bullet arced through the air, moving closer and closer to the target. The audience held its breath, and even the wind seemed to pause in anticipation. Though the first two shots had provided invaluable information, it was this moment that would define her trajectory, her skill, and her reputation on the range. Every calculation, every hour of practice, every whispered lesson from her grandfather had led to this instant of perfect focus. The teens leaned forward collectively, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. Hank's eyes narrowed, watching with the intensity of someone witnessing a rare performance. Emily, calm and precise, embodied the balance between preparation and execution, the art of turning knowledge into action. Though her finger was steady, Emily felt the familiar flutter of anticipation in her chest. She smiled faintly, embracing it. The shot would not just prove her skill. It would prove the value of patience, discipline, and unwavering belief in oneself. The late afternoon sun had begun to dip lower behind the rolling hills, casting long, jagged shadows across the Texas shooting range. Emily crouched slightly, her red rifle steady against her shoulder, her eyes locked on the distant steel target. 2 attempts had already left her with valuable data, and while the second had come closer than the first, she knew that perfection would not be achieved without patience and focus. Every micro-adjustment mattered. The wind shifted subtly again, carrying with it a faint rustle of dry grass. She noted each variation, calculating the precise influence it would have on her bullet's trajectory. Around her, the group of teens who had mocked her earlier were now silent, their whispers fading into tense anticipation. Some leaned against the fences, unsure whether to watch or look away. The once playful atmosphere had been replaced by an almost reverent tension, as if the entire range were holding its breath. Hank, the veteran range master, stepped a little closer, though he remained careful not to interfere. He had witnessed moments like this before, rare flashes of extraordinary focus in young shooters, but few had displayed it with such deliberate calm. Emily closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, inhaling slowly. She allowed her mind to settle, letting go of the lingering echo of mockery and skepticism. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory, steady and firm. "A calm mind shoots truest, Emily. The rifle will tell you what to do. You only have to listen." She opened her eyes, scanning the distant target. The glint of steel seemed to grow sharper, as if the universe itself were aligning to the moment she had prepared for all her life. The sun's warmth beat against her back, the breeze shifting her hair against her cheek, but Emily felt nothing outside the scope's circular view. Her finger hovered over the trigger, steady and unwavering. She adjusted the scope one last time, making micro changes to account for the subtle wind currents and the slope of the terrain beneath her feet. She was aware of every detail, the friction of the gravel beneath her boots, the gentle creak of her rifle's stock, even the faint distant murmur of insects in the dry grass. Her focus was absolute. She wasn't thinking about the skeptics behind her or the impossible distance of the target. She wasn't thinking about the hours of practice that had led her here or the lessons from her grandfather that guided her hand. In this moment, all of that was background. She was thinking only of the rifle, the target, and the path that connected the two. She was a conduit of precision and patience. Hank watched her closely, sensing that she was approaching the critical moment. He had taught many shooters, and he knew that the difference between an extraordinary shot and a missed opportunity was often psychological. A lapse in focus, a tremor of doubt, a fraction of hesitation. Any of these could ruin the effort. But Emily was composed, her body still and confident, her mind unshakable. The other teens behind her shifted uneasily. Some whispered to each other in awe, trying to convince themselves this was only a fluke, while others leaned closer, drawn by the intensity of the moment. The red rifle, once dismissed as a toy, had become an emblem of relentless focus, a symbol of determination that demanded attention. Emily didn't notice them. She didn't need to. She had entered a zone where nothing outside her control mattered. She exhaled slowly, letting her heartbeat settle into a rhythm she could manipulate. Her grandfather had taught her the importance of syncing breathing with muscle tension, with aim, with release. One controlled exhale could align her entire body with the physics of the shot, making the bullet an extension of her own intent. She felt the rifle's weight, the balance against her shoulder, the tension in her finger as it hovered over the trigger. The moment was delicate, precise, and absolute. Emily's mind replayed the data from the first two shots. The first had missed entirely, passing slightly to the left. The second had come closer, striking near the target, but not connecting fully. She had analyzed every variable: the wind, the slight dip in elevation, the subtle tilt in her stance, and she had recalibrated. Now, every adjustment she had made, every calculation, every mental rehearsal, was converging in this single moment. Her eyes focused through the scope, tracing the invisible path the bullet would follow. The distance was unimaginable to most, 6,000 meters, nearly 4 miles. At such a distance, even minor miscalculations could mean disaster. Yet Emily felt a quiet confidence that went beyond mere skill. She trusted herself completely, and in that trust, she found clarity. The rifle would follow her direction. Physics would obey her calculation. The shot would be hers. The wind shifted again, a faint breeze brushing across the range. Emily adjusted, micro-correcting for the subtle variation in air movement. She aligned her stance perfectly, ensuring her weight distribution, balance, and finger placement were exact. Every motion was deliberate, every thought focused on the connection between rifle, bullet, and distant target. She was no longer a teenager being judged. She was a marksman in command of impossible forces. Hank muttered under his breath, barely audible. Patience. Timing, perfect focus. That's what it takes. He had witnessed many extraordinary attempts, but few displayed the depth of preparation Emily now embodied. The rifle's bright red paint, once a source of mockery, now seemed almost ceremonial, a beacon of precision in the golden afternoon light. The teens behind her exchanged uncertain glances. Some tried to pretend indifference, others whispered, and a few had begun to cheer silently, almost afraid to break the spell. Emily's calm intensity drew them in, even without intention. They could sense, even if they didn't fully understand, that she was about to do something remarkable. The air was charged, tense, alive with anticipation. Emily closed her eyes for one final fraction of a second, inhaling slowly and centering herself. She let go of any trace of fear, doubt, or distraction. She visualized the bullet's path, seeing it arc through the air, guided by the precise calculations embedded in her mind. She imagined the moment of impact, the resounding clang of steel that would announce her mastery. She felt herself and the rifle as one entity, every motion synchronized, every calculation internalized. She opened her eyes and took a final, controlled breath. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, her shoulders steady, her stance unwavering. She was ready. The world outside the scope no longer mattered. The wind, the sun, the murmuring teens, they were all background noise. All that existed was the rifle, the bullet, and the impossibly distant target. Hank's eyes narrowed as he watched, a rare mixture of awe and anticipation on his weathered face. The first two shots had been informative, but this was the moment that would define her. The potential for extraordinary success or near-miss failure hung suspended in the warm Texan air. Emily exhaled one last time, steadying herself with deliberate patience. The red rifle, the culmination of years of training, felt lighter now, an extension of her body and mind. She could feel the subtle alignment of physics, preparation, and instinct converging into a single fluid motion. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked sharply, echoing through the hills. The bullet tore through the air, invisible to the naked eye, traveling across the 6-kilometer expanse. The crowd leaned forward, collectively holding its breath. Even the wind seemed to pause in anticipation. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the moment where preparation and courage collided, where mockery and doubt would either be shattered or confirmed. Time seemed to stretch. Emily tracked every nuance of the bullet's path through her calculations, mentally adjusting, observing, and anticipating. The target, glinting faintly in the sunlight, waited. Every second felt eternal, every heartbeat measured. The red rifle had become a symbol, not of youth or novelty, but of focus, discipline, and extraordinary potential. The afternoon sun hung low over the Texas shooting range, casting long golden shadows across the uneven gravel. Emily's red rifle rested solidly against her shoulder, her finger gently poised over the trigger. She had already taken 2 shots, each a lesson, each a calibration, but now, after meticulous adjustments, she was ready to attempt the moment that would define her skill. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, tracked the distant steel target glinting faintly in the sun, nearly 6 kilometers away. The target was a speck to the untrained eye, but to Emily, it was a world of precision. Around her, the other teens who had mocked her hours earlier now held their collective breath. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Laughter had evaporated, replaced by disbelief, awe, and a tingling tension that vibrated through the air. The adults on the range, including Hank, leaned forward, knowing they were about to witness something extraordinary. Hank's experienced eyes had seen incredible shooters attempt the impossible before, but the combination of Emily's composure, preparation, and uncanny calm made him tense with anticipation. Emily exhaled slowly, synchronizing her breath with the rhythm of her heartbeat. She visualized the bullet's path, tracing an invisible line from the barrel of her rifle to the steel target. She accounted for wind speed, humidity, gravity, and even the subtle tilt in the uneven terrain beneath her boots. Every variable had been measured. Every calculation had been rehearsed countless times. And yet, she knew that nothing could be taken for granted. The shot had to be perfect. Her grandfather's words echoed in her mind. The rifle will tell you what to do. You only have to listen. She felt the rifle vibrate slightly against her shoulder, a familiar reassurance. Her muscles tensed, yet remained supple and controlled. She exhaled once more, letting her focus center entirely on the point of impact in the distance. She was aware of nothing else. The wind, the murmurs, the shifting sunlight, they all faded to background noise. The wind shifted subtly, rustling the dry grass and carrying faint scents of dust and sagebrush. Emily accounted for it instinctively, adjusting the scope by minute fractions of a degree. Every detail mattered. Every micro-correction brought her closer to the target, closer to turning months of preparation into a single perfect shot. She breathed deliberately, feeling the tension in her body align with the rhythm of physics, training, and instinct. Hank's eyes narrowed, watching intently. He had seen moments like this before, rare flashes of true focus, but Emily's calm precision was extraordinary. Many marksmen relied on instinct at such extreme distances, but Emily combined instinct with calculation in a way few could match. The rifle, once dismissed as a toy, now symbolized mastery and control, an extension of her mind and body. Emily adjusted her stance one last time, making minute corrections to ensure her balance was flawless. Her fingers gripped the rifle with the perfect combination of tension and relaxation. The steel target shimmered faintly in the distance, almost a pinprick to the naked eye, yet perfectly aligned with her crosshairs. She exhaled slowly, letting her mind and body settle into a single harmonious motion. The teens behind her shifted nervously. Some whispered in awe, others tried to hide their disbelief. They had spent hours mocking the girl with the bright red rifle, confident that she was out of her depth. But now, they were silent, caught in a tense limbo between skepticism and awe. Even those who had dismissed her earlier could sense the significance of the moment. Emily's finger moved gently against the trigger, and she remembered the countless hours in her grandfather's garage, the late evenings spent practicing, calculating, and perfecting her aim. Every lesson he had taught her, the patience, the attention to detail, the respect for the rifle was alive in her movements. She was no longer merely a teenager, attempting an impossible shot. She was the culmination of preparation, discipline, and unwavering focus. The rifle barked sharply, the sound slicing across the range, echoing off the distant hills. A bullet tore through the air, invisible against the bright afternoon sun. Time seemed to stretch as the projectile traveled 6 kilometers of distance, each millisecond weighty with anticipation. Emily's eyes tracked the trajectory as best as she could, noting subtle shifts, calculating adjustments for the next attempt if needed. But deep in her heart, she felt the shot had been true. The air seemed to hold its breath alongside the onlookers. The target, glinting faintly against the sunlit horizon, awaited the bullet. Even Hank leaned forward slightly, sensing the rare and delicate alignment of skill and circumstance. He had seen impossible shots before, but rarely with such quiet confidence and perfect preparation. Emily's mastery of both science and instinct was palpable. Then came the moment of truth. The bullet struck the target with a sharp, resonant clang that echoed across the hills like a bell announcing the impossible. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The teens, once mocking, were frozen in disbelief. Hank stepped forward slowly, his face breaking into a rare smile. Emily lowered the rifle slightly, chest heaving, but her composure remained intact. She had done it. The impossible shot had been made. For a few seconds, silence enveloped the range. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if paying respect. The mockers' laughter was gone, replaced by stunned admiration and disbelief. Emily's red rifle, once considered a toy, had become a symbol of skill, patience, and mastery. She had not only hit the target, but had done so with a precision that left everyone questioning their assumptions. The crowd erupted into applause, cheers, and exclamations of amazement. Hank clapped his hands together slowly, his voice carrying across the range. "I haven't seen a shot like that in decades," he said, shaking his head in awe. The teens who had mocked her earlier approached cautiously, offering apologies and tentative congratulations. Emily nodded politely, her focus already shifting inward. She had proven herself, but more importantly, she had honored the lessons of her grandfather. She stepped back from the rifle, her hands still trembling slightly from the intensity of the moment, but her eyes shone with calm satisfaction. Every calculation, every adjustment, every moment of preparation had culminated in a single, extraordinary shot. She had turned skepticism into awe, ridicule into respect, and preparation into triumph. Reporters who had arrived after hearing whispers of her attempts began to capture the moment, recording video and taking notes. Social media would soon explode with the story of a teenage girl, a bright red rifle, and an impossible 6,000-meter shot that had silenced a crowd. Emily, however, barely noticed. She was already reflecting on the process, on the subtle adjustments, on what she had learned from the first two attempts. Hank walked up beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "That was perfection," he said. "Most people couldn't even imagine doing what you just did. Not just the shot, but the discipline, the focus. You've got something rare." Emily smiled, acknowledging his words. She didn't need praise. The shot itself was reward enough. She had demonstrated mastery over doubt, physics, and perception itself. The teens who had mocked her now treated her with respect, their previous arrogance replaced with admiration. Even the skeptics couldn't deny the brilliance of her achievement. Emily realized that true mastery wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about controlling oneself, respecting the craft, and committing fully to preparation and focus. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the range, Emily cradled her red rifle with care. She thought of her grandfather, imagining his proud smile and the gentle pride in his eyes. Every lesson he had taught her, every solitary hour of practice, had led to this moment. She had hit the target, yes, but she had also hit something deeper, the culmination of patience, discipline, and unwavering self-belief. The crowd slowly dispersed, but their whispers lingered. Emily's shot would be talked about for years to come. It was not merely a feat of skill. It was a lesson in preparation, focus, and perseverance. She had proven to herself, and to everyone watching, that mastery was not about appearances, luck, or the size of the weapon. It was about knowledge, patience, and absolute belief in one's ability. Emily lowered the rifle fully, her eyes still fixed on the distant target. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, honoring the quiet triumph of a girl who had turned ridicule into awe. The red rifle, once dismissed, had become legendary not because of its color, but because of the skill behind it. The echo of the steel target's resounding clang still vibrated through the valley when the first whispers of recognition began to spread. Emily lowered her bright red rifle, her chest heaving slightly from the sheer intensity of the moment, yet her expression remained composed. Around her, the group of teens who had once mocked her earlier now stared in stunned silence. The laughter, the ridicule, the casual arrogance, all of it had evaporated in the wake of her impossible 6,000-meter shot. They had witnessed something rare, something extraordinary, something that would be etched into their memories for years to come. Hank stepped forward, his weathered face breaking into a broad smile. "I haven't seen precision like that in decades," he said, clapping Emily on the shoulder with genuine admiration. "Most adults wouldn't even dare attempt a shot like that, let alone a teenager. You've proven something remarkable today." Emily nodded quietly, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence and the recognition from someone like Hank said everything. Reporters had arrived shortly after the shot, their cameras clicking, microphones poised, capturing the scene that seemed almost surreal. Emily's feet, the red rifle, the girl, and the impossible 6,000-meter distance was already becoming the story of the day. Her image flashed on screens as journalists took careful notes, filming the distant steel target and the tiny figure of the marksman who had defied expectation. Social media would later explode with hashtags praising her skill, determination, and composure. The teen who had been mocked for carrying what many thought was a toy rifle had become a symbol of mastery and focus. The crowd that had once laughed now approached Emily with cautious admiration. A few of the teens who had mocked her earlier offered tentative apologies. I didn't think you could actually do it," one boy said, avoiding eye contact. Emily smiled faintly, her eyes calm and steady. She understood their disbelief and their awe, but she also understood that respect couldn't be demanded. It had to be earned. Today, she had earned it in spades. Hank guided her to a shaded bench beside the range. "Sit," he said. "Catch your breath." That was one of the most impressive long-range shots I've ever witnessed. Emily sank onto the bench, her hands cradling the rifle carefully. She felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Months of practice, countless hours spent calculating trajectories and adjusting her aim, had all culminated in this single moment of triumph. She had proven to herself, more than anyone else, that preparation and focus could achieve the extraordinary. As she rested, Emily's thoughts drifted to her grandfather. He had passed away the previous year, leaving her with not just a rifle, but a lifetime of lessons on discipline, patience, and respect for one's craft. She could almost hear his voice in her mind. "Skill isn't about how loud you are, Emily. It's about how steady you can remain when everything else is noise." She smiled softly, knowing he would have been proud. Every calculation, every adjustment, every lesson he had imparted had come alive today. The reporters, now surrounding the area, began asking questions, eager to capture the story. "How did you do it?" one asked. "What made the difference?" Emily replied with measured calm, choosing her words carefully. "It's all about preparation," she said. "Patience, focus, respect for the rifle and the target. You can't rush it. You have to trust the process." Her response, simple but profound, drew nods from the professionals and awestruck teenagers alike. Video footage of the shot began to circulate rapidly, showing Emily aiming with absolute precision, the red rifle gleaming in the sunlight. The 6,000-meter distance seemed almost surreal to viewers, many of whom had never imagined a human being capable of such accuracy. Comments and shares poured in across social media platforms, praising not only her skill, but her composure under pressure. Young shooters, especially girls, found inspiration in her quiet determination, seeing a reflection of their own potential in her achievement. Local shooting ranges began recognizing her accomplishment, asking her to participate in demonstrations, competitions, and workshops. The 6,000-meter shot had not just proven Emily's skill, It had inspired a community, ignited curiosity, and demonstrated the power of preparation, focus, and perseverance. Her feat became a symbol for what could be achieved with discipline, patience, and relentless attention to detail. Emily's mother arrived shortly after the event, rushing to embrace her daughter with tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, holding Emily tightly. "You've done something incredible." Emily hugged her back, feeling the warmth of family pride and the quiet satisfaction that comes from fulfilling one's potential. The accomplishment was more than a moment of public recognition. It was personal, a tribute to the lessons, love, and encouragement she had received throughout her life. Even among her peers, Emily's reputation shifted instantly. The teens who had mocked her earlier now regarded her with awe. Some approached, asking questions about her preparation, her practice routines, and the techniques she had used to make the impossible possible. Emily answered patiently, never condescending, never dismissive. She understood that inspiration could be contagious, and that sharing her knowledge was a way to honor her grandfather's teachings. Hank, still observing, approached her once more. "You know, Emily, this is going to be talked about for years. Not because of the rifle, not because of the distance, but because of the mindset you displayed. Patience, calculation, focus. That's rare. You've got something extraordinary." Emily nodded, feeling a quiet pride. Recognition was gratifying, but what mattered most was the mastery she had achieved, the discipline she had honed, and the confidence she had earned in herself. The sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the range and painting the sky with warm hues of orange and gold. The crowd slowly dispersed, but the energy of the day lingered. Emily remained seated for a moment, reflecting on what had transpired. She had taken an impossible challenge, met it with preparation and skill, and succeeded. The red rifle, once mocked as a toy, now stood as a symbol of determination, precision, and quiet mastery. Emily knew that the story didn't end here. This was only the beginning of a legacy. The viral footage, the media attention, and the recognition from the shooting community would open doors she had never imagined. Competitions, workshops, and speaking engagements were already being arranged, all centered on her incredible achievement. Yet for Emily, the reward was not fame or accolades. It was the quiet satisfaction of having trusted her preparation, mastered her focus, and achieved what many deemed impossible. In the following days, local news outlets covered her story extensively. Interviews, videos, and articles highlighted the feat of the teenage girl who had silenced skeptics and stunned experts alike. Social media buzzed with admiration and awe. #RedRifleEmily began trending, and comments poured in from aspiring shooters, parents, and enthusiasts from across the country. Her story became a symbol of perseverance, meticulous preparation, and the power of self-belief. Emily took it all in stride. She remained focused, grounded, and humble. She knew the achievement was significant, but she also knew that mastery was not about recognition. It was about process, dedication, and consistent practice. The red rifle had been the instrument, but she had been the force behind the shot. She reflected on her grandfather's lessons, knowing that every word, every demonstration, and every correction had contributed to this defining moment. Hank visited her later that week at the local range. "You've inspired a lot of people," he said, smiling. "But remember, the work doesn't stop here. This is only the beginning. You've set a standard now, both for yourself and for everyone watching." Emily nodded, understanding fully. She would continue practicing, honing her skill, and pushing her limits further. Today had proven what was possible, but the journey of mastery never truly ended. Even among the younger shooters at the range, Emily's feat sparked curiosity and ambition. Girls who had previously doubted their place in competitive shooting now looked at her with newfound confidence. Boys who had mocked her now asked for tips, eager to learn the secrets behind her perfect shot. The ripple effect of her achievement was immediate, far-reaching, and profound. As night fell over the Texas range, Emily packed up her red rifle carefully, securing it with the reverence it deserved. The day had been long, the experience intense, and the recognition overwhelming, yet she remained calm, thoughtful, and grounded. She knew that true mastery was not about the applause, but about discipline, focus, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had done her best. Emily left the range that evening with a sense of fulfillment she had never felt before. The impossible shot had been achieved, but more importantly, she had proved to herself that preparation, patience, and unwavering focus could overcome doubt, ridicule, and the impossible. The red rifle, once mocked, had become legendary not because of its color, but because of the skill, determination, and precision behind it. The evening settled over the Texas range like a gentle, cooling blanket. Emily sat alone on the shaded bench, her bright red rifle resting carefully across her lap. The distant hills were bathed in gold and orange as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, and a soft wind carried the faint scent of dust and wild grass. The range was quiet now, emptying as the last of the spectators and reporters left. She watched in silence, the events of the day replaying in her mind with startling clarity. Every clang, every murmur, every gasp felt amplified as she reflected on what had just transpired. She thought back to the first moments on the range that morning, the teasing laughter and the incredulity that had greeted her red rifle. How quickly those sounds of doubt had shifted to awe and admiration. She could feel the memory of every sneer and whispered joke, yet they no longer stung. They had been temporary noise, inconsequential, compared to her preparation and focus. The moment she had lifted the rifle, adjusted the scope, and aimed at the impossible distance, she had become immune to external judgment. She realized now that true confidence came not from validation, but from mastery over herself and her craft. Emily's thoughts drifted to her grandfather, whose lessons had guided her every step. His patient voice, calm yet firm, echoed in her mind. "The rifle doesn't lie, Emily. Neither do you. Trust yourself." Every shot she had taken today had been a testament to that teaching. The impossible 6,000-meter shot had not just been an act of skill, it had been a demonstration of discipline, preparation, and focus. She realized that her true achievement was not hitting the target, but proving to herself that meticulous effort and belief in her abilities could overcome any obstacle. She recalled the 2 earlier shots that had missed, and she allowed herself a small, appreciative smile. Those misses had been instructive, crucial steps in her journey. They had forced her to observe, adjust, and refine. Without them, the final, perfect shot would not have been possible. Emily understood now that failure, when approached thoughtfully, was never final. It was data, feedback, and opportunity wrapped into one. The lesson was clear. Mastery required patience and a willingness to learn from every outcome, no matter how small. The red rifle, gleaming faintly in the evening light, seemed to take on new significance. Once dismissed as a toy, it had become a symbol of her dedication and her ability to rise above skepticism. She lifted it gently, feeling the familiar weight and balance that had guided her across the range. Her hands traced the stock, the barrel, and the scope with reverence. It was more than a tool, it was a partner, an extension of her mind and body. In its weight and form, she could feel the culmination of her countless hours of preparation, practice, and patient study. Emily reflected on the reactions of those around her. Hank's words of admiration resonated deeply. The recognition of her discipline, focus, and skill had validated the effort she had put into her craft. But more importantly, it reinforced her understanding of what truly mattered. Peer respect, public recognition, and media coverage were gratifying, yes, but they were secondary to the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had performed at her highest level, under immense pressure, and had succeeded. The internal validation, the alignment of preparation, focus, and execution was the true prize. She thought of the teens who had mocked her earlier, now cautious, curious, and even inspired by her demonstration. Their disbelief had transformed into tentative respect, and she understood that her actions had left a lasting impression. Emily recognized the responsibility that came with being an example, whether she sought it or not. Her success had the power to inspire, to shift perceptions, and to encourage others to approach their own challenges with patience, focus, and determination. This realization filled her with a quiet sense of purpose. Her mind wandered further, contemplating the broader implications of the day's achievement. The impossible shot had not only proven her abilities, it had illustrated the power of preparation, patience, and relentless attention to detail. It was a lesson applicable far beyond the shooting range. Life, Emily realized, often presented distances, challenges, and obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Success was rarely a product of luck or shortcuts. It came from observation, learning, adaptation, and meticulous application of knowledge. The shot she had made was a metaphor, a crystallization of principles that extended into every endeavor she would pursue. Emily's thoughts turned inward, reflecting on the mental discipline that had allowed her to perform under intense scrutiny. The weight of expectation, the pressure of achieving the impossible, and the persistent external doubts had not shaken her. She recognized that her inner strength had been cultivated over time, through countless hours of quiet practice, focused attention, and deliberate training. Confidence, she understood, was not innate, it was built incrementally, through repeated effort and mindful reflection. Every moment she had spent preparing had contributed to this moment of mastery. She looked down at the rifle once more, feeling a wave of gratitude. It had been her instrument, but also her teacher. In its precision, she had learned patience. In its demands, she had cultivated discipline. And in its partnership, she had discovered self-belief. Emily understood that mastery was relational, not merely technical. It required harmony between mind, body, and tool, and she had achieved that harmony today in a way that few could ever hope to replicate. Emily rose slowly, the fading sunlight highlighting her calm composure. She began walking along the range, her footsteps deliberate, absorbing the stillness and the residual energy of the day. The distant hills, now bathed in twilight, seemed to whisper approval. She reflected on the fleeting nature of public attention, applause, and recognition were transient, but the internal growth she had experienced would endure. Today had proven her skill, but more importantly, it had proven her resilience, her capacity for focus, and her understanding of preparation as the path to excellence. She paused at the spot where the steel target had stood, now dimly visible in the evening light. Her gaze lingered, contemplating the enormity of the challenge she had just overcome. 6,000 meters a distance that had seemed impossible had been conquered not through bravado or luck, but through deliberate, methodical effort. Emily smiled, acknowledging the quiet satisfaction of accomplishment. It was a moment she would carry forward, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what discipline, focus, and belief in oneself could achieve. As the sky darkened and stars began to emerge, Emily realized that her journey had only begun. The shot she had made would ripple outward, inspiring others, opening opportunities, and shaping her own future. Yet she understood that the most profound impact would always be internal. The confidence, insight, and discipline she had cultivated would guide her in every challenge to come. Mastery, she now knew, was not a destination but a continuous practice, a lifelong commitment to focus, preparation, and thoughtful execution. Emily looked up at the night sky, the red rifle slung gently across her back. She thought of her grandfather once more, imagining his proud smile and calm voice. "Remember, Emily, it's not just about the shot. It's about how you prepare, how you focus, and how you grow." She carried those words with her, knowing that today had been a culmination of lessons learned, but also a starting point for further mastery, growth, and exploration. She walked toward the vehicle, her mind at peace, yet alert with the awareness that her journey had only just begun. The accolades, recognition, and awe from others were secondary to the internal mastery she had achieved. Emily had discovered something far more valuable than fame. She had discovered the power of deliberate preparation, patient focus, and disciplined execution. That knowledge would stay with her, guiding every endeavor she pursued. The red rifle, now carefully stored, was more than a tool. It was a testament to growth, patience, and achievement. Emily understood that true mastery came not from external validation, but from internal alignment, the union of skill, preparation, and self-belief. She had proved that she could achieve the extraordinary, but she also knew that every extraordinary achievement was born from consistent, deliberate effort. Tonight, she felt the truth resonate deeply within her. The night had fully descended over the Texas range, stars pricking the sky like pinpoints of distant light. Emily walked slowly along the gravel path, the bright red rifle slung across her back, its weight now familiar, almost comforting. The echoes of the day's impossible achievement still hummed faintly in the air, the clang of the steel target, a collective gasp of awe, the quiet murmurs of respect from those who had once doubted her. The world around her was calm now, almost serene, but her mind was alive with reflection, pride, and a quiet determination to continue her journey. Emily paused at the edge of the range, gazing at the rolling hills where her bullet had traveled 6,000 meters, a distance that had once seemed insurmountable. She remembered the morning's laughter, the mockery, and the disbelief she had faced. Those moments no longer held power over her. Today had proven something greater than her skill. It had proven the value of preparation, focus, and belief in oneself. She smiled faintly, acknowledging the journey she had undertaken. Every hour of solitary practice, every lesson from her grandfather, every miscalculation and adjustment had culminated in this extraordinary achievement. The following morning, word of her feat spread like wildfire. Local news outlets covered the story, and soon national media took notice. Reports featured footage of Emily raising her red rifle, aiming with quiet precision, and executing a shot that defied expectations. Interviews, articles, and social media posts praised not only her skill, but her discipline, patience, and composure under pressure. She became an inspiration to aspiring shooters, especially young girls who had previously doubted their place in a male-dominated field. Emily had unknowingly created a ripple effect of courage, skill, and possibility. Yet amid the media attention and accolades, Emily remained grounded. Recognition was gratifying, yes, but it was secondary to the lessons she had internalized. She knew that mastery was not measured by applause or viral videos. It was measured by focus, preparation, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing one had done their best. The red rifle, once dismissed as a toy, had become a symbol of deliberate practice and unwavering self-belief, and Emily carried it with reverence. It was a tool, a companion, and a reminder of what could be achieved with patience and discipline. Hank, the veteran rangemaster, remained one of her staunchest supporters. He had witnessed countless shooters attempt extraordinary feats, but few displayed the depth of preparation and focus Emily had shown. "You've set a new standard," he told her during one visit to the range. "Not just for shooting, but for every challenge that requires patience, skill, and perseverance. People will remember today, not because of luck, but because of your mastery." Emily nodded quietly, appreciating his words. They validated her efforts, yet reminded her that the true measure of success was internal. Emily's peers now treated her differently. The teens who had mocked her in the morning approached with newfound respect, asking questions, seeking advice, and learning from her methods. The transformation was remarkable. Ridicule had turned into curiosity, skepticism had shifted into admiration, and doubt had blossomed into inspiration. Emily patiently shared what she had learned, emphasizing the importance of preparation, observation, and disciplined practice. She understood that her influence went beyond hitting an improbable target. It was about modeling resilience, focus, and the pursuit of excellence. Her mother, still overwhelmed by pride, often reminded her, "You've inspired more than just your peers. People everywhere are watching, learning from your focus, and realizing what's possible with patience and dedication." Emily listened humbly, acknowledging that the attention was a testament to the lessons she had internalized, not just the shot itself. Every accolade was secondary to the mastery she had cultivated. She had turned ridicule into respect and doubt into achievement, but the most profound reward was the growth within herself. As the weeks passed, Emily's feet continued to resonate. Invitations to speaking engagements, workshops, and competitions arrived from all over the country. Shooting ranges, schools, and community centers sought her insights on training, focus, and technique. Emily recognized that her impact extended far beyond the 6,000-meter shot. She had become a symbol of perseverance, patience, and the extraordinary power of preparation. Her red rifle, once a source of laughter, was now a beacon of inspiration, representing a quiet but formidable mastery of skill and self-discipline. One afternoon, as Emily demonstrated proper technique to a group of aspiring shooters, she noticed a young girl struggling to align her stance and hold her rifle steadily. Emily approached, offering gentle guidance, not criticism. "Patience," she said softly. "Focus on your breathing. Trust yourself in the process. Every adjustment counts." The girl's eyes lit up with understanding, and Emily smiled. Moments like these reminded her that her journey was about more than personal achievement. It was about sharing knowledge, fostering growth, and inspiring confidence in others. Even as her reputation grew, Emily maintained a disciplined practice routine. She understood that today's achievement, as remarkable as it was only a milestone in a lifelong journey of mastery. Each day, she returned to the range, observing, adjusting, and refining her skills. The red rifle, polished and cared for meticulously, was a constant reminder of the power of preparation, the importance of focus, and the necessity of patience. Mastery, Emily knew, was not a single accomplishment. It was a continuous process of learning, refining, and striving for excellence. Emily's reflection extended beyond the range. She realized that the principles she had applied to achieve the impossible shot were applicable in every aspect of life. Discipline, patience, careful observation, and trust in one's preparation could guide her through academic challenges, personal goals, and unforeseen obstacles. The lesson was universal. Success was rarely instantaneous. It was deliberate, cumulative, and built upon consistent, focused effort. Today had proven that principle in the most vivid way imaginable. Her grandfather's memory remained central to her journey. She often imagined him beside her, guiding her hand, offering advice, and reminding her to trust herself. "Skill is meaningless without discipline," she would hear him say in her mind. Patience turns practice into mastery. These lessons had manifested in her legendary 6,000-meter shot, and they would continue to guide her as she pursued ever greater challenges. Emily understood that the truest legacy was not fame, but the knowledge, discipline, and growth she carried forward. Emily also reflected on the humility required to wield skill responsibly. The attention, praise, and admiration she received were fleeting. The true achievement lay in her ability to remain disciplined, focused, and thoughtful. She understood that mastery demanded continual self-awareness and dedication. Every shot, Every calculation, every moment of preparation was an opportunity to refine herself, to grow, and to embody the lessons she had internalized over years of practice. The red rifle, gleaming faintly in the late afternoon sun, became more than a tool or a symbol. It was a tangible reminder of what could be accomplished through patience, focus, and deliberate effort. Emily had turned ridicule into respect, doubt into achievement, and personal preparation into public inspiration. She realized that her journey would continue, and that the lessons of today would shape not only her own future, but the potential of those she inspired. One evening, as Emily walked along the empty range, she paused at the spot where the steel target had stood. She imagined the bullet arcing perfectly through the air, the sound of impact resonating across the hills. The impossible had been achieved. And yet, she knew that achievement was only part of the story. The greater narrative was the growth, discipline, and self-belief that had made the shot possible. Emily understood that true mastery was not a single moment, but a lifetime of focus, learning, and intentional effort. As night fell, Emily carefully stored the red rifle, its vibrant color now a symbol of accomplishment, resilience, and quiet mastery. She looked up at the stars, contemplating the journey that had brought her here, and the road that lay ahead. The 6,000-meter shot would be remembered, celebrated, and shared, but for Emily, the greatest triumph was internal. The knowledge that preparation, patience, and self-belief could make the impossible possible. Emily knew her legacy was just beginning. She would continue to inspire, to mentor, and to grow. The red rifle would always remind her that the impossible could be achieved with focus, discipline, and courage. She smiled, a quiet, confident smile, knowing that today's victory was both an ending and a beginning, the culmination of years of learning, and the foundation for a future shaped by mastery, integrity, and the pursuit of excellence.